Thank you for joining me. My name is Sean Lindemuth, and we'll be going over the part 2 of my Dredd helmet build on this FabricaShawn Friday. So I needed extra material, and what I ended up doing was putting tape on the inside of this because I wanted to curve, and casting a couple thin sheets of plastic out of this. I'm still working with the 321. And then I secured them to the helmet from the line down using foam. That line right there represents vertical, so we're going to have a nice slope back to it. This is way more material than I need. It's going to end up getting cut down minimum to here, but I wanted enough material just to mess with. One of the problems with working with the old material is the moisture that's absorbed into it over the time has caused it to bubble up. So it kind of acts like a little foam, but that's not really what I need as a finish. So I'm gonna end up filing it down and continuing. So at this point, I have the 1-inch thick widened strip, and then these pieces added onto it as a base. So I'm gonna make sure I have, like, there's a dent right there. I'm going to heat that and pop that out, and then lay out where the center line is, lay out where the front and rear vertical lines are, and then find that perpendicular line that goes across as that bottom piece. One of the things I did to actually try to get flat plastic material without making a flat mold was actually flattening a helmet. So I actually cast, this is a direct casting of one of the vintage helmets that I had cast, and cut it apart. I made it thin on purpose just for this, and then heated it up in sections and smashed it. Or not smashed it like, oh, Hulk smash, but laid it flat and pressed down on it with a board. So this amounts to the entire helmet right here. This is not quite what I was hoping for. However, they might still be usable pieces for me. And when I cut them with scissors, they shatter. And what was happening, you can kind of hear it. It was cracking as I cut. So if I heat this up and it actually gets kind of soft, then it cuts like fabric and actually comes out pretty nicely. It's pretty wild. But this is smooth cast 321 though. So most of the stuff I'm working with is 321. The 65D doesn't like bonding with itself once it's cured. So I was having some delamination issues a couple years ago on the last one I did, or last helmet I made from scratch. So I'm doing it differently this time. At this point, I'm getting down to the final shape. I went ahead and laid out some lines here. This line right here is represent vertical, and this line is actually representing the horizontal line. So when I set it down, I've got references. This protrusion here, I'm going to be doing next. And the way this fits me, with this cut right here, I was able to lay out the rough estimates of where these are going to be. I'm going to actually try to do that a little more accurately. But what I've discovered is that I think this is about where the visor should go. So the thickness here is going to end up being anywhere between 10 millimeters to a ½ an inch thicker. So it's going to be a little bit of adjustment. The measurement between these two between these two pieces right here is 125 millimeters according to the reference site, and based on their picture from straight on and from side, I've actually come to the determination that this is actually where the bottom is going to be cut. And I'm a little bit disappointed I put so much material on this just to cut it back, but I'd rather have too much than not enough. But either way, I'm going to work through this material, and we're getting there, and that's going to be it. So I mixed up a thicker batter, and I'm filling in some holes and made the little ledge on top. Most of this is going to end up getting filed off, but I need it for material. This is really more making it structural so that I can sand it. And I'm gonna have to check the references. This may be a little too high, but we'll see once I get that going. Kind of liking the way it's looking though. So I have the bottom trimmed up to where I wanted it. These two lines right here, one represents the numbers that I believe the Urban helmet was using, and this represents where I think it should be. So somewhere in between is a good median, but what I'm going to do is go to that length right there. I have the lines laid out still that represent where the visor is going to be cut out. However, that distance from where it meets my head to my nose doesn't feel right. I'm gonna cut it up here and extend it lengthwise an inch. That should get me the length that I believe it should be. And then I'm gonna relay out the front and work on that angle before doing the raised portions on this whole overlay. Doing this will get me a parallel line to my cut line, which is my reference line on this entire helmet, so that when I put it together with the space, I'll be able to draw a straight line to it. So I did this cutting outside, but the Dremel bit that I'm using is this really awesome metal bit. It actually goes in really well, and if you move it around, you'll actually get some carving action going. You can see I'm down through to where I was supporting it with the foam inside when I cut it through the center axis line. Something a little heavier duty than that. Voila. I'm down into two halves. But since my reference line was flat, that will end up being how it's going to be put together. And since I'm going straight out, this line curving a little bit was perfect. I wanted to go as smooth as possible across certain areas and then meet this at 90 degrees because a shallower angle is a little bit more difficult to clean up. So I'm measuring these ends down here to make sure that they are the 1 inch gap that I'm looking for. Then I'm going to be, that's a little bit off, I'm going to be gluing something secure across it so that I can tape it up, and then I'm going to fill it in with a 321 putty, if you will, so that I can get this back down to a sanded finish. Well, this was part of the really thin casting that I laid flat, and I'm hoping that the curve is similar enough that I can just super glue these on and be able to run the few of these and have it real secure. Making it nice and flat, giving me a mechanical adhesion here as well. So I'm gluing this on the outside because that's a good reference plane. The inside is real rough, and I was having a few issues with lining up the outside that way. This stuff right here will grind or file off really easily. So it won't be as big of a deal. So here I've got a mix up with some thickener in it, and I'm going across it with this silicone spatula, filling in some holes, building up some certain spots just to get it into the shape. I've got a little bit of extra mix that I had done. I'm gonna have to go through again to get the marks that I want. Now that I've widened it, I need to make sure everything's gonna be where I want it to be. So I went through and actually cut out the foam. I found that the foam was encapsulated, but it wasn't really strong. And I didn't want to build up the outside too much, so I went in, cut out the foam, and actually sanded it all out using the abrasiveness of this bristle brush. Once I got all the foam out, I went ahead and sloshed a thicker coat of 321 in, and I've got a little bit on the outside. I got to do the final shape, then I'll mark it up for the raised ridge, and some of this is covering some holes that occurred, some cracking. So now I can reinforce it from the inside rather than the outside to get a thicker layer and support any cracking that might occur again. So I'm taking a hacksaw and trimming this back. So I have determined where I need to put the bottom of the badge. It's going to be an angle like this. I got to verify that measurement, but I'm going to hawk this back while I'm figuring out all the other measurements. That's going to be the approximate angle for that badge on the front. It's going to be built out here, so it'll come to fruition a little bit later. So hopefully you found that interesting. Hopefully there was a tip or trick in there that you might have enjoyed. I have some other videos on my builds, and if you really like it, give me a like, subscribe if you really want to, or if you don't want to, subscribe anyway. That might help me out. But either way, thank you very much for joining me. We'll see you on the next FabricaShawn Friday.